welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily and this is the Astral Library. I apologize if the lighting kind of changes throughout this video. It is a nice rainy day here in California, which means there's not a lot of sun. And it means I can't really record with some great lighting. So we're gonna hope this is good enough. It looks all right. I'm coming at you today with my wrap up for January. So the first month of the year is done and I did in fact read. Did I read a lot? No, I did not read a lot at all this month. Or rather, that's a lie. It kind of leads into what I'm sure you saw from my title. I wanted to use this wrap up to talk about not only what I read book-wise, but also to talk about the fan fiction I read this month, because I'm reading every single day, but that doesn't always translate to I'm reading books every single day. So I thought, okay, let's go ahead and highlight some of my favorite fan fictions that I read this month and what they're about, as well as talking about the books that I read. So let's go ahead and jump straight in. And we're going to start actually with the books I read. So I read 2 books this month, and they're relatively decently sized books. So I read Days of Blood and Starlight and Dreams of Gods and Monsters, which are books 2 and 3 of the Daughter and Smoke and Bone trilogy. So I completed this series finally after putting it off for 5 or so years, a long time. I did a whole vlog on Days of Blood and Starlight because this is part of my 24 books for 2024 challenge. So this one, I'm not going to talk too much about. I ended up giving 4 stars. I really enjoyed this read, and hard of a time as I had getting back into it, coming from such a long hiatus from the first book in the series. It was a struggle, but I still really enjoyed myself reading this. I decided after I finished that book, I wasn't going to let another 5 years go by, so I picked up Dreams of Gods and Monsters, and this is a beefy ass conclusion to this series. I think this was almost 700 pages. No, it was 613 pages. So it's still quite a long book. And I can't tell you too much about this book because it's the last book in a trilogy, and it would make no sense that I would tell you what's going on in this book. But one thing I did want to talk about is that this was my least favorite read of the series. And not because I think it's bad. I still think that Lani Taylor did an amazing job creating the world of this story. It's masterfully crafted. It's so interesting. It's super complex. And this was not the book to display that in. My biggest gripe with this book is that it is the end of the series. This series should not have been a trilogy because there's so much going on in this last book. Like, so much. Like, normally we have an A plot and a B plot. This one has like a C plot and a D plot, and it's all just kind of like thrown into this last book, and it doesn't give you any time to develop the really cool characters and the really cool world and the really cool magic behind them, which made reading this a little frustrating because it felt like I was playing catch up every few minutes, and I was just like, what is going on? Who are these characters? Why is this important? Why are we spending so much time on these characters? Only for it to be wrapped up really fast the last like 100 or so pages of this. It was a mistake because I think if this series was longer, like let's say 4 books or 5 books, I really felt that we could have developed all these points a little bit more. I think even just splitting this into 2 books, where we're ending on the war that we've been building up to in books 1 and 2, and then the last book could really focus on the extra content she was trying to introduce in this book. It was just too much for one book. Even though everything she introduced was interesting, it wasn't enough time or space, even in 600 pages, to get everything out of it. So it ended up feeling rushed in places. It ended up feeling really slow in other places. The pacing was kind of all over the place. And I'm so mad because I really wanted to love this book and love this series, but the ending of it just took it all away. And everything I really enjoyed about it, I was more frustrated in this book. I think I still ended up giving this 3 stars because there was still a lot I liked about this book. It's just for people who are like thinking about reading the series, I would just like to preface that this is a very complex world and the ending is rushed, or rather the ending is overly ambitious for the space that Lani Taylor had. Again, if she had just 1 more book, I think this series would have been perfect. But because it's only a trilogy, I don't know how much I can like super recommend this book, knowing kind of what of a mess the last book is. But those are the 2 books I read this month. Productive in that I started my 24 for 2024 challenge, and that I end up finishing one of my long-running series that I have on my TBR. Productive in terms of like numbers of books I'm reading, not so much. Not that there's a certain number you have to be reading. Like, that's a myth. Like, don't let BookTube and like Goodreads and all that like trick you otherwise. You can read 1 book a month and still be doing stellar. I typically tend to read about 3 to 4 books, depending on the level of busy I am. And it felt like, I think just this last book in particular made me feel bad, because I was like, I could have been reading so many other things that I really, really enjoyed, rather than kind of like going through the mess that last book was, even despite the parts of me really enjoying it. Okay, but next, let's go ahead and talk about some fan fiction I read, because books are not the only form of reading you can do on the internet and just in life. You can do reading in all forms and styles and genres, and one of my favorites is fan fiction. I read fan fiction every night, and sometimes every morning. Right before I go to sleep and right when I wake up, I usually read a little bit of fan fiction. And so I thought, let's go ahead and highlight some of my favorites that I read this month. So let me grab my laptop, tell you guys, and you can see my stickers on it. So the first fan fiction I have on here is actually a pair of 2. So it's an ongoing series. The first is called A Place Like Home, and the second one is called The Kids Are All Right. Both of these stories are by MissLightBright, and these are fan fiction based in the Skate to the Infinity universe, which is a skating anime. Highly recommend, by the way. So good, so colorful and fun. Perfect. You can watch it on Crunchyroll. I somehow found myself back into my Skate the Infinity phase, and I just like wanted to consume fan fiction of it. And so I was like, okay, let's go ahead and dive back in. And I've read MissLightBright before. So she's actually written 2 of my favorite fics in the fandom of all time, and that is All Was Golden, When the Day Met the Night, and Meet Me on the Fire Escape. I know her username. I love her writing, and I love her storytelling. And so when I was looking for new fanfiction to read, I came across her newest series, and oh my god. I cannot tell you how obsessed I was while reading these stories, because they were so good. They were so good. So the basic premise of this story is that we are following 2 characters who have been married and have just adopted their, I believe 5-year-old son. And they're just living in absolute domestic bliss until one day a woman comes knocking at the door with a child, claiming that Joe, one of the fathers, is the son to this kid, Reki. And at first, of course, he's had no idea whatsoever that he's ever had a kid with this lady. He doesn't even really recognize the woman knocking at the door. But she doesn't really give him any time to deny or to kind of, say, take your kid with you, lady. She just drops the kid off and leaves. And suddenly, Joe and Cherry, his husband, are left with 5-year-old Reki, who has been through this many times before. He reveals that his mother constantly is doing this trick to guys where she leaves Reki for a period of time, telling the father that he's the father to Reki, and Reki has no idea who his actual dad is. So as he's staying with Joe and Cherry and getting to know their son Mia, he's falling more and more in love with the family and just really wanting to stay, because he's never had a stable life and home before. And so Joe and Cherry in return, of course, start falling in love with Reki and really wanting to keep him. It's such a wholesome story that really tugs at your heartstrings. And I just, not only do I love these characters, but just I love the way that MissLightBright really reimagines the relationships they have and the different dynamics, because it's just domestic family fluffiness, and it was so good. It was so good. It had me squealing, and it was nice and long. I believe that fic was, I want to say 70 to 80,000 words. So it's quite a long story, and it really gives you something to sink your teeth into. So excellent. And that first one is complete. The sequel, The Kids Are All Right, is an ongoing story, and that one's even longer. So in the sequel, we are following Reki and Mia and Joe and Cherry, I want to say something like 7 years after the events of the first story. And we are watching as the boys grow up and are kind of battling their own anxieties and self-doubt, typical teenage stuff. And the parents kind of learning that they can't know everything about their kids. And the more that they try, the more mistakes they are. So it's a story about parenting and about growing up and about learning to love each other no matter the difficulties and the problems, and learning to open up and share your feelings with people. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. I promise you, if you want to just read a nice, wholesome, like found family, like great family dynamics, relationships, read this one, please. It's so good. Or like anything else by her. She does some amazing storytelling that I just chef's kiss. So good. All right, and the last fanfic I want to share with you is, funny enough, another Skate the Affinity fanfic. So I was just kind of like in a mood this month. And that one is called Reclaiming Infinity by Aragon19. Now, while the last fic is what we would call like a genfic or a fanfiction that doesn't really focus on any sort of relationship per se at the like heart of it, this next one, Reclaiming Infinity, is very much a romance fic, and it's a romance between Reki and Langa, who are the main characters of the anime. And oh, you can tell by my smile how much I really enjoyed this one. And so I picked this fic on a whim because it does the thing I hate the most with fanfiction. It does not have a very long summary or a very descriptive summary, and it has almost no tags, which is the most frustrating thing because it hides some of the most beautiful fanfics or some of the worst ones. You never know what you're getting into when you don't have a summary. And so I kind of clicked it on a whim. I said, okay, you know what? Let me go ahead and check it out. And oh my God, it was so good. I just finished this one, I want to say last night or the night before. So it's fresh in my mind. I'm still very much obsessed with it. And essentially we are following Reki and Langa several years after the events of canon or after the events of the show, and they've drifted apart. So they were best friends during the show, but something happened and it's been many years, and Langa had moved to Tokyo from Okinawa, and Reki has no idea what happened to them. They were so close, and then all of a sudden Langa ghosted him, and he hasn't heard hide nor hair in so many years. And the worst part is that Reki had the hugest crush on Langa that he never got to share. He's still been pining after him all these years, as well as kind of dealing with the anger and resentment for being abandoned. And just as Reki thinks that he's kind of in this like stuck place in his life where he can't move forward from his feelings and just is feeling stuck in his career, he gets an opportunity that takes him to Tokyo to work for the National Professional Skating League in Tokyo, which is actually where Langa works at. Instead of skating though, Reki would be making and customizing skateboards. And at first he's really excited because he has another friend who is also about to join the team and move to Tokyo, but he's hesitant because Langa's there and he doesn't know how to confront him or even what to say when he would see him again because he's still having all these feelings. But as they of course reunite, we're finding that that connection is still very much alive and burning between them. They're now just having to figure out what happened and what made them fall apart in the first place, because it seems that neither of them wanted to let the other go. It was so good. It was, like I said, a surprise. I was not expecting to love that fic as much as I did, and oh my God, love it did I. Here for all the angsty moments and for the kind of tension between them, because this is a fic that really, even when we find out what happened between them, we're still dealing with the lingering resentment of those feelings. Just because we know why something happened doesn't mean we're automatically okay with it. And I think this fic does a really good job of displaying that even when we like are told all the answers, we could still have lingering resentments because of how we felt in that moment. It was so good. Highly recommend. I will make sure to link these fanfictions down below so you can read them if you so choose. Or if you want to just go watch like Skate the Infinity, I also highly recommend that anime. It's so much fun. It's so bright and colorful, and the characters are really interesting, and the art's beautiful, and I can talk hours about it. Okay, so we're not going to because that's a whole separate channel, a whole separate video. All right, but that is all I read in January, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed getting to hear me rant about the books I was reading, as well as talk about some fan fiction I was reading. But let me know what you guys read this month. Leave a comment down below. Tell me, what was your favorite book that you read this month, or what was the most frustrating thing you read this month? I'm always happy to hear and to talk to you guys about books. That's why we're all here. It's why we are friends, and why I hope you come to this channel to hear my thoughts on books. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider leaving a thumbs up, and again, leave a comment down below. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!